Welcome to the Great Girlfriends podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and everything in between. We're your hosts. I'm Sybil Amuti.
And I'm Brandon Staniel.
And before we jump into this week's episode of the podcast, make sure you sign up for our newsletter at
thegreatgirlfriends.com.
And don't forget to leave us an amazing iTunes review.
Yes, that is the payment for listening to this podcast.
I love it. 5 stars all the way. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
And we have with us. I'm so excited.
Yes, the amazing Dorinda Walker.
Hi, ladies.
Dorinda. Welcome back, Dorinda.
Thank you. You know, I always love chatting with you guys.
I know. We love you so much. We're so happy to have you back.
Yes. And you know what's interesting, Great Girlfriends, those of you who have heard our podcast with Dorinda, she did some amazing finance podcasts. But we were like, Dorinda, those were incredible, but we need to hear about your life story, because she has one of the most powerful life stories I think I've ever heard. And I am in the process right now of reading her book, Protected by Purpose, and I can barely put it down. So you guys are in for such a treat. I'm thinking pen and paper could still be appropriate here, Sybil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Grab your pen and paper. Dorinda, you're one of those women that just drops a million gems, and I don't even know if she realizes it. So you're like, wait, what'd she just say? Hold on, let me go back. Let me go back and jot that down. You have so much to offer, and you've offered our Great Girlfriend community so much from the time that you've been involved. You have just continued to support and pour your passion for women, your passion for us to live in honesty and integrity with our stories, to be empowered by our stories. And you've done so much to align women from all across the country. I mean, the way you do it is it's very organic and seamless. And it's something that our Great Girlfriends can really pull from. But we want to just first get you talking about who Miss Dorinda is. So we'll start with this great question we like to ask, which there once was a girl named Dorinda Walker. And you fill that in for us.
There once was a girl named Dorinda Walker who suffered from the 3 Ds, which I call dysfunction, despair, and demotivation. I was a young girl who didn't think my life was worthy of living and attempted suicide. And God brought me back. And I am just happy to be here today as a strong woman of faith who's overcome her parents being addicted to drugs, her father dying from AIDS, her mother battling a long addiction to heroin, and all of my feelings of unworthiness, which led me to where I am today of learning that process of finding my faith, learning how to forgive, and putting in the work with fortitude to be the best Dorinda that I can be.
Now, you know, you just loaded us with a complete feature film just now.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, wait, I got so many questions.
So many questions. Like, people are like, wait, is that what was the book? The Coldest Winter? Like, they're going through trying to figure out, because Dorinda, it's one of those stories that you've heard before. You've seen it, you know, in a film, but to see and experience you, Dorinda, no one would ever imagine the depth of pain and also resilience that you've had to possess over the years. No one could imagine some of the things that you've experienced, because one of the things about you, Dorinda, is that you have this ease, and it's a calm cool, and and it's like it's as if things don't, you know, it's as if you've never had overwhelm, or you've never had to really carry any heavy weight, because you're so calm and so cool about things. But I'm hearing like the strength of a woman that we could never measure.
You know what it is, I think, and my husband always says this to me. He said, you don't get, overwhelmed by anything. And I think it's because when you've went through all of the life challenges that I've been through, you learn to know what's worth, putting effort into, and what's worth just letting go. And 99% of the time, the things that some people would worry about and, get them down are things that it's just a moment in time and it'll pass. So I've learned not to hold all of that stuff in and to take things for what they are and to pray and just ask God to release it. So I think we have to go through stuff in life in order to understand what life's really all about and what matters.
Absolutely. I remember when you were talking about writing a book. And, people talk about writing a book and you go, yes, girl, write your book, tell your story, make it happen. And the next thing you know, Dorinda was going to print. And I was like, wait. Dorinda, because I know you're working, and you were traveling the nation, at a frequency that was hard to keep up with. And so I think that there was an aggressive push in your heart and in your mind that this story needed to be made visible to the next woman. And I know that there are listeners who have experienced challenges and who've gone through circumstances in their life. But Dorinda, the way you tell your story, it was just as if trouble was chasing you. And when I read in the book, it seemed as though you were the only one in your family that had this light or this potential that literally that protected you from the darkness that was chasing you. Do you feel like that was true?
I do feel like that's true. I feel like that I've had an angel of protection around me my whole life because there's no other reason why I'm not dead or in jail, because I was definitely on a path to prison or death. And to see where I am now, I'm just in awe of God's grace and mercy on my life. And the impetus for me writing the book was my need to be obedient to God. So I never thought about writing a book or being an author. That was never an aspiration of mine. And I was at a faith-based conference and Bishop Cheryl Brown was preaching. I was one of 1,000 people in the room. And when she was finished, I went to walk out the room to go back to my hotel room. And she literally ran off the stage and tapped me on the shoulder. And she said, "Miss, what's your name?" I told her my name. And she said, "I hope you weren't embarrassed that I kept staring at you during my sermon." And I said, "Honestly, I didn't notice it, but why?" And she said, "You have an anointing all over you. You're destined to do something great." And I didn't know what to say to that. So I invited her to tea, along with another pastor who's also my mentor, Dr. DeForest Soares Jr. And we started talking about our upbringing, and something put it on my head and my heart to share my upbringing, which I'm always very reluctant to share. At the time I was reluctant to share. And she said, "You should write a book. You'll change lives." And Dr. Soares invited me to speak at his women's luncheon at his church. And there were about 200 to 250 women in a room. I shared my story for 30 minutes and literally 50 women stood in line and waited up to an hour to speak to me. And the first woman said, "Nobody knows this, but I've been contemplating suicide for the last couple of days. And after hearing you speak, I know that's not what God wants me to do."
Wow.
And that said to me, okay, if just by sharing my story, this is the reaction, then I really do need to write the book. And I got it done.
Wow. What were the, what was kind of like the thing that you heard over and over from the women who were standing in the line that day?
It was, "I'm a former addict," or "I'm still an addict and I'm afraid to come out to the church." It was, "My daughter's hanging with the wrong crowd. How can I help her?" It was, "Can I just give you a hug because so many aspects of your story resonate with me?" It was, "I'm in a domestic violence situation. You're inspiring me to have the courage to get out." It was those type of things.
Wow. It's so interesting that when we let down all of our guards, become totally vulnerable, we open up a space for other people to do the same. And, everything. I mean, you really don't hold back anything. This book really is. It feels like I'm in a movie reading the book, and it feels like I'm in your life reading the book. And it's because I know you personally. To read what I'm reading and to know you, I'm just like Sybil said, it's like something had to have been covering you. And it's interesting because sometimes we think that because we've grown up in a certain situation or in a certain environment that things, that things can't change for us. And for some people that's, growing up in poverty or growing up around bad relationships, but you've grown up around all of it, right? So much of it. And I look at you and you have an amazing marriage and, children that you love and like all of these things, like you had so many strikes against you, Dorinda. What is the thing that, you feel like, was there anything throughout your childhood, any light, anyone who said something to you that kind of kept you going and made you feel like, oh, I can come out of this?
I had an aunt, Mary, that I talk about in the book, who always believed in me. And she always said that I was going to do something great. And, I didn't see or the vision at the time of what she had for me, but she always believed in me. And she was the person that when I was ready to get out of the environment that I was in, selling drugs, sleeping with drug dealers, distributing drugs to the people I loved, she was the one that said, come, I'll take you and I'll help you heal. And so wow. She was a significant presence in my life. And she was a role model because her and her husband were middle class, working class people. And let me back up. My whole family was, but they all were, most of them were heroin addicts except her. She suffered from bipolar disorder, which I realized later in life. But she was the only one who didn't use drugs or alcohol to cope.
Wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The thing that I immediately thought about, I actually felt convicted just now, because how many of us have family members who are in a situation, a generational situation, right? Where, it's been addiction generationally, or no one in the entire family has ever had a job, like ever. Had a job before, or, we all have a part of our family that we're like, okay, we tried to help them. We've tried. Okay. And so now we're everybody in the family is kind of at the point where they're pretending like this piece of the family don't exist. But what our responsibility is not only to our family members, right? But even in our community, there's a big piece of our community. And when we're progressive and we're around certain things, there's a big part, especially of the African-American community, who need someone to go and say, I see something in you. Yeah. And so for me, you just gave a call to action, really, for all of us to say, who do we need to reach out to and say, I see something in you? Because just saying that in someone can really change their lives.
And yeah. I want people to understand that my family was a loving family, although we were very dysfunctional, which is why I wanted to own the narrative of this story, because I didn't want people to look at my mother as this drug addict who was no good and didn't have morals or values. She was actually the opposite. She was a very loving and kind woman. And all of my family members who used drugs, they just happened to suffer from the disease of addiction. And as a young child, it's hard to understand that. And when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to find a place where, or even a want to start that process of forgiveness. And what I've seen in touring the country with this book is it allows people to start that process. It allows people to start the healing and reach out to people to say, I'm going to forgive you.
Dorinda, when you say, when you talk about the love in your family, most of us, even when you read, in reading the book, I hear this sense of covering and protection over your family and your mother. And so much of, my reading time in the book, I imagine that there must have been a large sense of difficulty growing up, and that, with some of the variables that you guys had going on, like the drugs and some of the abuse of family members, it's hard to know what each day is going to look like. And it's hard for a kid to really feel safe and feel secure. Yet you, Dorinda, I still don't understand how you felt a sense of security and connection. What was it about your environment when you talk about in the book, what was it about it that made you feel the love despite all the things that you were experiencing?
I mean, my family still said I love you. They still hugged me. They still embraced me. My parents did the best they could to shield me from the things that they did to feed their addiction. But, they couldn't, when you're leading from a place where I need to get high, you can't protect me. And I knew that what they were doing was not normal. And so I want to read this from my book. Although I was never physically abused by my parents, I suffered emotional turmoil because of their addiction. I know it was not their intent, but unfortunately, it is a consequence for children born to drug-addicted parents. There was always a sense of instability and insecurity that resulted in me devaluing my self-worth and developing low self-esteem.
Yeah.
This is so good. So how have you been able to kind of forgive, right? Because like you would have to be crazy not to hear how much Dorinda's mom loved her and how much you loved your mom. But still there's so much hurt there. So how have you been able to forgive, or did you even have to go through that process of forgiveness for your parents, for your family? At what point did you walk through that?
My mother, when she beat her crack addiction after she became a prostitute, I was very angry with her, and I didn't want to forgive her. And I gave her an ultimatum. I said, Ma, you either are going to have to kick the crack or you'll never see me and my unborn child, because at the time I was pregnant with my daughter. And she chose her love of me over her addiction of crack. She went to the Salvation Army, homeless shelter, and went to rehab and never used crack again. And so that showed me that she wanted to put in the effort. She never was able to kick the heroin addiction, but she was a functional addict. She went to work every day. She paid her bills as best she could, and she loved me. And after my daughter was born, my grandmother, her mother, and me pulled our resources together to get a 3-family home. So we had the privilege of living together in that home. My kids grew up for 16 years in the same home with their grandmother and great grandmother. And us 3 as women were able to go through that process of forgiveness, understanding, and healing, because we were all going through something. My grandmother she went through a bitter divorce after being married for 36 years. She came home from work and a woman opened the door and said, I moved in, you moved out, your stuff is on the truck.
Whoa.
And she had to file bankruptcy and start all over. And so, my grandmother going through that and my mother going through her struggles of learning to forgive herself and trying to be the best person that she can be, living with her addiction. And then me trying to become the woman that God had destined me to be. So it was a very healing experience, those 16 years of us living together and, cherishing each other and all the stuff that we did. It was beautiful.
I want to backtrack too, Dorinda, because the chapters just keep. You have lived your story. I promise. You have lived so many lives, and the chapters of the book are just so powerful because there was a chapter or period in your life where you were a distributor, and and you were sort of, almost like a female kingpin of a sense in your neighborhood, but highly notarized and respected for being a distributor at the time. What was your relationship like with your parents during that time frame?
I was out on my own. Decided to start selling drugs because my dad was suffering from the AIDS virus, and I knew that heroin was the only thing keeping him alive. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to be a mule because that doesn't make sense. I'm not going to be on the corner. So I robbed one of the biggest drug dealers in Essex County and became an instant distributor. And I got caught up in the cycle of drugs that I really despise, because not only was I selling drugs to other people's parents, but I was providing drugs to my parents. And so we knew instinctively that it wasn't the right thing to do, but none of us, because we were so dysfunctional, could say, no, this isn't the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
This was
Dorinda, you talk over that. You say that like y'all went to the grocery store. Like you you passed over it. I mean, and it's not to you. You've told it so many times, and you lived through it. But for the person who has met you, experienced you, or doesn't know you, and is listening, to hear you say that you robbed the biggest dealer in Essex County, and then that position you on the chessboard as somebody who was then moving the weight in the neighborhood, you got to understand, we need a minute. Like, we need a minute, Dorinda.
She says one sentence, and I have 10 follow-up questions, and I'm sure our great girlfriends do too. So, first of all, you need to get this book, Protected by Purpose, so you can hear the entire story. It's on Amazon. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, Sybil.
Like, come on. I mean, we need a minute. Because honestly, Dorinda, I think, even what you said, the purpose for you, it's always purpose. It's just always purpose. But the purpose for you, even in distributing at the time, I'm hearing part one was to ensure that your father had what he needed to stay alive. And part two was like, wait a minute, I could actually contribute to the family and help them remove some of this instability. It was never about anything more than that, from what I could hear. Yeah,
it wasn't. And I will say I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I knew that being a distributor would help me make the most money and would keep me out of the limelight, because I was always in the background, so there was less chance of me getting caught. So there was definitely a strategy behind what I was doing.
Wow.
And this was before you and your mom and your great grandma. Was this before you guys all moved in together?
Oh yeah, it was way before, because I was a drug dealer at 16 and 17.
Okay.
So it wasn't until I had my daughter, which was much later.
Okay. Got it.
So Dorinda, tell us a little bit about the time that when things got very low for you and that you were institutionalized in the mental health hospital.
So April 9th, 1988, my dad, when I went to bring my dad his heroin, he told me that he wasn't going to make it through the week. And my reaction was rage and anger. I said to him, how could you say that? How could you give up? I'm giving you your heroin. You're a loser. And the last thing I said to my father was, I hate you. He was admitted to the hospital the next day. And mind you, he had been in and out of the hospital at least 20 times, and I had never went to visit him. But looking back on that experience, what I realize now is that my 16, 17-year-old brain couldn't cope with the fact that my dad was dying. So if I went to the hospital, it would be a reality, which is why I never went to visit him. So that Monday, my boyfriend at the time said, you have to go see your father. And I said, no, I'm not going to go, because I'll see him when he gets out like every other time. And he insisted and wouldn't drive off until I went into the hospital. And so when I walked into the room, my dad was in ICU in a coma. And I remember dropping to my knees and, just praying to God. It felt like someone had just ripped my heart from underneath me. And that was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 7 o'clock that evening, he woke up clear as day and said, I want to say goodbye. Nana and Buck are here to get me. Nana was my great grandmother and Buck was his uncle. And so that's when God showed me there was a heaven. After my dad died, after the funeral, my mom disappeared. And it was unlike my mom for us not to speak at least 3, 4, 5 times a week because I gave her drugs. So, I went into panic mode and I just assumed she was dead. And so I decided that I wanted to be in heaven with my parents. So the first attempt at suicide, I took some pills off my grandmother's dresser and it turned out just to be Lasix. So all it did was make me go to the bathroom. But the second time I said, okay, I'm going to get it right. I went to the local drug dealer. I bought a 10 on 10 of pills. And if you know anything about pills back in the day, a 1-on-1 would get you high. A 10 on 10 would kill an elephant. I took the pills. My cousin, who was one of the biggest gangsters in New Jersey, found me. By the grace of God, God sent him to my home. He saw me laying on the floor. Through the window, he broke down the door. He said he was beating me and punching me and just praying to God not to take me because he thought I was already dead. I don't remember any of that. I woke up in the psych ward and I remember saying to myself, why in the heck am I here? Because I'm not crazy. I'm just trying to go to heaven. And so I had to go to 6 weeks of therapy and that's how I landed there. And when I was released into my paternal grandparents' care, because I was still a minor, I had every intention on doing it again.
Wow.
And my great grandmother who came to get my father came to me. And I'll never forget, she had on all white. She had a flowered halo around her head. And she looked about 30 years younger, but I knew who she was. And she said to me, God sent me here to let you know that you are not responsible for your father's burdens on earth. He has a different plan and purpose for your life. And that was the beginning of my transformation.
Wow. Here's for, I don't think, for the great girlfriends who don't know Dorinda, you should know this. You should know that Dorinda has not only led one of the top departments of a Fortune 500 brand or maybe 100 brand in the world, but she actually created a full opportunity for herself, was responsible for, I don't even know what your budget was, Dorinda, but was responsible for a huge budget at this company, was promoted to VP of this company. So I just have to set that up because, there's a lot of us, right, who've gone through so much and no one ever knows it. They just see our title as we are now and they assume that we've never gone through anything. But I'm just listening to everything you're going through. And again, looking at everything you've been able to accomplish. And I'm just like, okay, this has to be a movie, a book. Well, it's a book. But this story is just so, I don't even know what the word, incredible. Wow. So if you don't mind, Dorinda, I would love to go back to just forgiveness for a while. So your grandmother came to you. She told you you were not responsible for your father. I know a lot of our great girlfriends are dealing with forgiveness. How do I forgive a father who was never there? How do I forgive a father who, was there, but didn't do what he was supposed to do? How do I forgive a mom? Like all of these things that we're going through when it comes to forgiveness. Can you kind of walk us through some of the things that you had to do to truly forgive? Or some of the things our great girlfriend should consider?
I had to confront my mother on her stuff. We had very open, sometimes very uncomfortable dialogues. When, she was going through addiction, she wanted to hide it from her parents and siblings. And I instinctively knew all the time when she was high and when she wasn't. And so I told her, we can't move on unless you're honest with me about everything. And we had a special bond in that, and that allowed us to learn how to forgive one another. And what was so interesting, my mom died in 2013 in my house. She suffered from cancer, and the last 5 weeks of her life, she was with me, and she kept saying that she didn't want to die and that she didn't deserve me taking care of her. And I was stunned because I'm like, what do you mean you don't deserve it? And she was like, I have so much to still make up for. And I couldn't believe that she didn't truly know in her heart that I had forgiven her a long time ago. And so I was able to give her something that I wasn't able to give my dad. And that was the gift of forgiveness. And I was able to hold her and her frail little, self at that time and say, Mom, I forgave you a long time ago. And I understand that everything I went through was the preparation for where I am now. I have a successful career in corporate America. I'm happily married. I have 3 beautiful kids, a granddaughter. I live in this beautiful house. Like, there's nothing for you to make up for. And I think that allowed her to die in peace. I know it did. And when she passed away, I remember going through her pocketbook and finding 20 bags of heroin and smiling as I flushed it down the toilet because that demon could no longer control my mother.
That's so good. So Dorinda, what about the demons, I'll say, that tried to control you? How did you forgive yourself? How did you find the strength to move yourself into a complete new space in life? Like Brandis was saying, you moved yourself so far from the streets as if it never happened. And, so how did you do that? And then how did you come to a place? Many times when you've gone through things like such as what Dorinda's gone through, people want to come to you and they want to say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I do know that you probably wish certain parts of your story hadn't happened, but then if you didn't experience some of the things that you've gone through, you kind of wonder, would you be the woman you are today? So how did you manage to, sort of unveil the Dorinda that we know, and accept her and love her and connect with her and groom her the way you did, because you are such an exceptional woman. I mean, exceptional woman in so many ways. I think that everyone carries that sentiment, Dorinda, and I think we all wonder. A big part of it, the wondering is, how did you do that?
So one aspect of my story that we didn't talk about is the abuse, the physical and mental abuse that I suffered at the hands of my mother's boyfriend. And I have to say, a large part of my healing was God sending my husband in my life. So I met my husband when I was 18, and he chased me for a year. He would not give up. And he showed me what it was for a man to truly love a woman, what love was supposed to be. He poured his love, his heart, his soul into me, even when I didn't deserve it, when I was mean to him. But he stood with me and always told me that he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. He encouraged me to go back to school to get my GED. He encouraged me to pursue my dreams. He put his dreams on hold so that I can pursue mine. So it was really the love of my husband that honestly helped me get through. My grandmothers, who they demonstrated to me what it was to be a strong woman. And so I had those influences in my life to help me. And at the end of the day, though, it was also my need to be obedient to God. So there was one instance 2 weeks before my 18th birthday where, although I was working at the time, I still had a foot in the street. And I was in the projects with my friends, and we were on our way to Club Sensations in North New Jersey. And I was fur coat and Gucci down, and these detectives rolled up on us. And as I was being frisked on the wall, I heard the voice of God say, you're going to be 18 in 2 weeks. You're either going to die or go to jail. What's it going to be? And that was God's ultimatum. And that's when I called my aunt, and she took me out of the projects and brought me up to the suburbs. And I just took myself out of that environment. But God always talked to me and told me what I needed to do. Even in corporate America, when I was working hard and I felt like I deserved the promotion, and I was working for promotion and not for service, God said, you're not ready yet. And when I changed my mindset and said, okay, I'm just going to work hard to serve and give back to others, that's when I got the promotion. That's when I started receiving accolades and blessings. And and all the things that you guys know I've accomplished in corporate America. And so I've just learned to be obedient to God and to always work from a place of service. And that has helped me to become the woman I am today.
Oh, child.
I know. I know.
Because honestly, Dorinda, you and I'm not trying to discredit it all. You make it sound easy, in a way, but it's your mindset. Your mind it's almost like you were always fixed on doing what was right. Even when you were doing what was wrong, the intent behind it was so pure that it's almost like you were covered. Because like you said, you could have been convicted and in jail today for some of the crime or some of the decisions that you made along the way. But it's like that grace and mercy, like that dynamic combo was just with you, and it just kept you from seeing the worst of the worst. Even in how you share the story now, you have so much dignity and such a high regard for the influences in your life that, even as you talk, in the book about the man, your mom's boyfriend, there's so many decisions and so many places where people are so bitter today and so resentful because they feel that their parents owed them more or could have made different decisions to protect them. I hear you pardoning the people that didn't know any better. And that's a grace, Dorinda, and a mercy that most people don't have for other people. People can't pardon people in the parking lot. And I'm hearing you talk about, the story of your life with such a grace and a pardon. And I just want to respect and honor you for the way that you honor your parents, the way that you honor all of the elders and the influencers, and the way that you serve them now by how you live. We don't get to go back over the past and edit it, but we do have our control over today for sure.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Sybil, because it wasn't easy. And you'll read in a book that it was a continuous struggle, but I had to go through the process. And what I learned about forgiveness is it's not for the other people. It's for you. Because if you don't forgive, you hold on to that baggage and that anger and that shame, and it holds you back. And so had I not been able to go through that process of forgiveness, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today.
For sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
We could just...
What do you think your legacy is, Dorinda?
Ooh, that's a good question. I hope that my legacy is that the people who know me will always work from a place of service, so that I model that, you always have to work from a place of service. I want my legacy to be that my life made a difference, that I was able to make an impact and help others. I want my kids to go on and do things greater than I could have ever imagined. And I just want my legacy to be that my life mattered. And, after touring the country all this year and sharing my story, I realized that some of the things that I went through aren't half as bad as what other people are going through, believe it or not. And sharing my story has allowed people to open up and say, I've never told anybody this, but I'm going through such and such, or I went through such and such. And those experiences for me have led to me now saying, okay, what's the next step in my journey, which is to open a home for women and children who've been victims of sex trafficking. And it's going to be called Lucy's House of Hope, which was my mother's nickname, Lucy.
Yes. That is just so satisfying. Oh my goodness.
I'm telling you. I'm sitting over here and I feel like I've just had a full experience, Dorinda. Like a full experience of like watching a movie or hearing transformation and hope, and your transparency is so amazing. And it's not easy to make an internal shift. It's not easy to go through forgiveness. It's not, I mean, we struggle with forgiveness on a daily basis.
Yeah.
For small things, like somebody left the milk out the refrigerator, you know? But it's none of those things are easy. And to hear you have gone through what you've gone through and to have seen you be a vessel of service, like she's not just saying that, that's actually who she is. It's just, I'm happy to know you, to be in your presence, to have this book. My sister just came into here while I'm recording and she's like, I need that book. So I got to order her a book and a few other people a book. But thank you so much, Dorinda, for having this conversation with us, for inspiring the great girlfriends in ways that you have no idea you've inspired them. But I don't want you to not know. I want the great girlfriends to let you know how you've inspired them. So can you let the great girlfriends know how to reach you personally if they want to leave you a note after this episode, and then where they can go to get the book?
Sure. So personally, you can reach me at dorindawalker.com. There's a place to contact me. I'm also Dorinda Walker on all social media, Dorinda J. Walker on Facebook. And you can buy the book on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Walmart.com. Or if you go to my website, there's a link right to Amazon from there.
And the book is Protected by Purpose by Dorinda Walker. And I think somebody special may have designed the cover, no?
Yes. So I want to give a big shout out to Kwaku, who helped me with the design. And then, you know, I'm so grateful for you guys and the people in my life who supported me and who've been there for me. And I'm looking forward to the next chapter. And I encourage people also, when you read the book, please review it on Amazon. That would be a great help to me. And send me feedback through my website. And so many people have reached out to me who've read the book and said, you know, because I read this book, I was able to call my mother and start that process of forgiveness, or whoever it is. And one of my favorite quotes from someone is, girl, I read that book. I laughed, I cried, I hollered. It was so good. So I think it will take you through an emotional roller coaster, but I think the end will leave everybody feeling good and wanting to go through that process, whether it's forgiveness or accomplishing a goal that they have. I think this book will inspire you to do that.
Oh, yes, I agree. And again, we can't thank you enough for your life, Dorinda. And just for continuing to serve, no matter what comes your way, you just continue to serve and serve and serve. And you do it so effortlessly, and with such a sincere and pure intent. And so we just thank you for that example. And I really feel great about this chapter that you're in now, and the difference that it's making to so many women who felt like they may not have had a blueprint for this level of forgiveness, this type of forgiveness, this essential forgiveness that gave your family a new story. You have a whole new legacy, Dorinda, than what you would have had. When I think about that, your daughter was born into a new story, you know?
Yeah.
How powerful is that? And so the woman that she has as an example is just this person that, oh my God, like your example, the story that she has, to know that, I'm sure she's like, wow, there's just so much, Dorinda, because she gets to live with you every day. Your family gets to see it up close. And we've seen your husband's proud smile every time you get an award and he's standing beside you. You see it in his eyes, just how honored he is to see and know you so personally. So
thank you. You know what? My daughter's of my three children, she's the only one who read the book. My boys won't read it because they said they don't want to know, based on my daughter's reaction. Because my daughter wouldn't stop crying. She's like, I can't believe you went through all of that. Because I never talked about it. My husband didn't even know the extent of it until I wrote the book.
Wow.
Wow. Well, they will one day. And the cool thing is you've actually got, how many of us don't have our life stories recorded? Your full life story is recorded here. And while we're sitting here talking, I just bought my cousin one. And I just bought my sister one. And I bought 2 others to give away. So great girlfriends. You guys know, Sybil always say this, don't be selfish. And Sybil, I was selfish. I just bought myself a book. But then I corrected it.
Thank you, Brandis.
Right,
I corrected my error. And I think this is a great book to give to mentees as well. If you're a great girlfriend and you're like volunteering a place, or someone who's going through a hard time, after you've bought your own copy, make sure that you buy someone else a copy, or buy, a few people a copy to encourage them.
Yeah, that's
and one thing I want to let the listeners know is that at the end of every chapter, I do a Dear Reader, where I go through what I learned from those experiences that I talked about in the chapter. And people have written to me saying that that's their favorite part of the book. And also at the end, I do 7 life lessons inspired by Weesey. And I always get questions about how I came up with those 7 lessons from my mom, given, everything that we went through, how she still inspired me despite all the things that she had to undergo. Being a prostitute, being in an abusive relationship, her battle with drugs. But she still inspired me. I still learned from her mistakes.
Yeah. Well, this is the gift. This is the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you so much, Dorinda, for being on the podcast today. Me and Sybil are sending you the hugest hug. We're so excited about your next journey, your next phase of your journey. Please keep us posted. We want you back on the podcast to talk about that next journey, because I do feel like this has a part 2 to it. So great girlfriends, this won't be the last time you guys hear from Dorinda. Thank you so much, Dorinda.
Thank you,
Dorinda. We love you.
I love you back.
We could not end this podcast without thanking our amazing husbands.
Yes, thank you, Kwaku.
And thank you so much, Rich Daniel.
And our beautiful children. Thank you, Sam and Dylan.
And thank you, Miss Sky Daniel.
And thank you to all of you great girlfriends for trusting us as your go-to source for everything life, love, and laughter.
You can check us out on our social, on Instagram,
The Great Girlfriends,
on Twitter,
_Great GFS,
and on Facebook,
The Great Girlfriends.
And please make sure that you join our Facebook group, which is over 16,000 women strong.
Absolutely. And make sure you listen every single Wednesday on iTunes, Spotify, Podcast Bean, Podcast Republic, Google Play, and every other podcasting service.
Absolutely.
Be sure to post your questions, share with your friends. Keep listening and keep being a great girlfriend. I'm Sybil.
And I'm Brandis.
And we're signing off.
Peace.
Peace.